Judge Subramanian asked for risk of flight or danger, increasing the amount of bond or devising additional condition doesn't change the calculus given the circumstances and heavy burden of proof that Combs bears. CEG docket 470 at 4142 through 43. At trial, the defense conceded the defendant's violence in his personal relationships. This type of violence, which happens behind closed doors, is impossible to police with conditions. On this basis, Combs' application is denied.
We told y'all, and let's just read the whole docket, and then we'll get the lawyer's reaction, because the lawyer actually reacted like a day before. Let's go.
United States District Court, Southern District of New York, United States of America, against Sean Combs, defendant. Arun Subramanian, United States District Judge. Defendant Sean Combs renews his request for bail pending his sentencing. On his application, Combs doesn't contest that detention is mandatory for his crimes of conviction. He relies solely on the limited exception to mandatory detention where 1. The court finds by clear and convincing evidence that the person is not likely to flee or pose a danger to the safety of any other person or the community if released. And there are exceptional reasons why such person's detention would not be appropriate. Exceptional reasons exist where there is a unique combination of circumstances giving rise to situations that are out of the ordinary. United States versus Cologne, quoting United States versus DeSoma. This statutory framework creates a presumption in favor of detention that places a plainly substantial burden of proof on the defendant seeking release. As for risk of flight or danger, Combs fails to meet his burden by clear and convincing evidence for the reasons set forth on the record at July 2nd, 2025 hearing. Increasing the amount of bond or devising additional conditions doesn't change the calculus given the circumstances and the heavy burden of proof that Combs bears. Where are we at? At trial, the defense conceded the defendant's violence in his personal relationships. This type of violence, which happens behind closed doors, is impossible to police with conditions. On this basis alone, Combs' application is denied. Even if the flight or danger requirement was satisfied, there are no exceptional reasons warranting a departure from what Congress has required. Combs' Mann Act arguments might have traction in a case that didn't involve evidence of violence, coercion, or subjugation in connection with the acts of prostitution at issue. But the record here contains evidence of all three. While Combs may contend at sentencing that his evidence should be discounted and that what happened was nothing more than a case of willing swingers utilizing the voluntary services of escorts for their mutual pleasure, the government takes the opposite view, that Cassie, Ventura, and Jane were beaten, coerced, threatened, lied to, and victimized by Combs as part of their participation in these events. That makes this case unlike any of the cases Combs points to and places it outside the narrow exception to detention that Congress otherwise deemed mandatory. To be clear, as indicated at the July 2nd hearing, the court offers no view as to how the parties' competing arguments about the evidence will cash out for purposes of sentencing, which is happening in just 60 days. At this juncture, however, the record doesn't establish the kind of out of the ordinary exceptional circumstances requiring immediate release. Combs also points to squalor and danger at the Metropolitan Detention Center, conditions that he says have been aggravated by federal government's aggressive budget cuts this year. The public outcry concerning these conditions has come from all corners, but as Combs acknowledges, MDC staff has been able to keep him safe and attend to his needs, even during the incident of threatened violence from an inmate in United States versus Chavez. The court found that the conditions at MDC rose to the level of exceptional reasons warranting release, where it was undisputed that the defendant posed no risk of flight or danger, or where unique circumstances counseled release, including the defendant's advanced age and serious medical conditions, which require care of the MDC may not be able to provide. Those facts are not present here, and nothing in Chavez suggests that exceptional reasons warrant release for every person awaiting sentencing in the MDC. Rather, the MDC is a factor, admittedly a serious one, to consider, along with others in making that detention. For these reasons, as well as those stated on the record at July 2nd hearing, Combs fails to satisfy his burden to demonstrate an entitlement to release. That motion for bail is denied. The clerk of court is directed to terminate docket 483, so ordered, dated August 4th, 2025, New York, New York. Arun Subramanian, United States District.
Now, some of y'all believe because you may have a difference of opinion that you are just anti whomever and whatever, and then you forget the facts, and that's fine. But one thing that we can't do over here is give you a message and then blatantly hide the facts. One thing about the case that they gave to the freaking judge, and I'm talking about Diddy's lawyers, is they gave a case of a dude who didn't beat anybody or anything like that and was a health risk. What part of the game did y'all think that y'all was playing? And they were supposed to do that. Let's just be fair, square, obvious, and honest. They were supposed to do that. But my whole thing is this. People had to understand the way the judge set it up. He set up the fight to say, bruh, y'all gonna talk about this domestic violence stuff or not? And the whole response was, oh, he's taking classes. So it's like this, how I see it. If you were taking mechanic classes or cooking classes, I can't call you a chef or a mechanic until you complete it. Not only that, you can't have a history of burning up kitchens, and you can't have a history of messing up cars just yet. You still gonna need a probationary period for you to do everything. So yeah, there's that. But let's get to the Diddy reaction from the lawyer, because I thought it was pretty good. Beam me up.
Okay. If he denies release again, does that give you a sense of what sentencing could be like? Now, to be clear, my understanding is Judge Arun Subramanian even said at the point, if I make a decision on release, it's not indicative of where I'm leaning towards sentencing. I know there's a pre-sentencing investigation still being conducted or has been conducted. There's a lot of factors to consider. But I have to ask about whether this is going to, have an effect on sentencing. Do you believe it's going to have an effect on sentencing? Does it give you a preview of where the judge is lining up? Because my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, you are probably going to be arguing for time served, maybe a minimum of 21 to 27 months. Where do you think the judge is going to go here?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you have to take each step at a time, and that the judge is not going to prejudge that. There's a lot more information he needs to get, not only the pre-sentence report, but we're going to make a very fulsome sentencing submission, and he's going to have, a much more detailed picture. Even, the trial was about the charges, right? And he doesn't have the full picture of all the factors about Sean's life that he's going to consider. There's going to be a big fight about the sentencing guidelines. We think actually we're going to end up arguing for an even lower guideline range than we had originally believed at the time of the verdict, where we didn't have we had like a couple of hours to try to figure out what to say about bail. So, I hope the judge will grant bail, but I feel confident that even if he doesn't, it doesn't necessarily mean he's not going to sentence Sean to time served. He's going to take everything into account when he gets all the submissions. And, I've got a lot of confidence that the judge is going to be fair and not prejudge the situation.
And I ain't gonna lie, the lawyer actually made some very good points. And it had me kind of rethinking my position just a little bit. Just a little bit. And some people need to understand this. I'm only reacting to what he's found guilty of. Everything else doesn't matter. But the things that matter. Check it out.
Something we can get into quite a bit. Let's talk bail. Okay, so we did a previous sidebar breaking down the defense's renewed motion for release, several arguments for why Sean Combs should be released on bail pending sentencing, acquitted of the most serious charges. There's no comparable case of someone who is convicted of the Mann Act alone and not engaging in sex trafficking or a prostitution for financial gain, and they would be locked up like this. Talked about the issues plaguing the MDC, how it is dangerous, how he's not a risk of flight, not a danger to the community. But do you think Judge Arun Subramanian is going to be persuaded by your letter, by your motion? Because obviously he specifically highlighted after the verdict your client's violence, how the defense asserted at trial that Combs was violent. Do you think he's going to have a change of opinion now based upon the legal papers?
Well, I think we certainly hope so. And, as we pointed out in the papers, the unfortunate violence that occurred was mostly a really long time ago, other than the one incident in June that Jane testified to, which was kind of unusual. I mean, they had been together for 3 years. There had been no violence, and she essentially started the fight. I'm not excusing anything, but it was kind of a one-off. And I think the government really hadn't put in any evidence of any recent violence. The Intercontinental video, remember, that was almost 10 years ago. He broke up with Cassie in 2018. And in our reply papers yesterday, we submitted a letter from Gina Hyun, who was one of the alleged victims, a different ex-girlfriend. And I think it was a pretty powerful letter about how Sean has changed, how she's not concerned about violence. She thinks he should be released on bail.
My name is Virginia Hume, and I'm writing as a person identified as victim 3 in this case. I've known Sean Combs for many years in both personal and professional capacity. From that experience, I have seen him primarily as a father, a family man, and a businessman, roles that he has always striven to uphold. I provide this letter to share my observations about his character and to respectfully request that the court permit his release on bond while the case proceeds. I acknowledge and respect that Mr. Combs stands accused and that the court must weigh public safety and the integrity of the legal process. At the same time, I believe it is important for the court to have full picture of who he is beyond the allegations. Our relationship, like many, was not always perfect. We experienced ups and downs and mistakes were made, but he was willing to acknowledge his mistakes and make better decisions in the future. Over the years that followed, he made visible efforts to become a better person and to address the harm he had caused. That right there is a bad sentence. By the time our relationship ended, he embodied an energy of love, patience, and gentleness that was markedly different from his past behavior. To my knowledge, he has not been violent for many years, and he has been committed to being a father first. I'm writing because I do not view Mr. Combs as a danger to me or the community. This is his first criminal case. Throughout the investigation and proceedings, he has been cooperative, respectful, and compliant. He has substantial ties to his family and community, including children who depend on him for emotional and financial support. Granting him bond will allow him to continue caring for his family and fulfilling his responsibilities while he's still subject to the court's supervision. I want to assure the court that if released, I believe Mr. Combs will adhere to all conditions imposed and will not jeopardize his freedom or the well-being of his family. Allowing him to be at home will also support the healing process for all involved. I respectfully ask that you consider these factors when deciding his eligibility for release. Thank you for your time and consideration. Respectfully, Virginia Hume.
So we're hoping that that will persuade the judge, given everything else, particularly, as you noted, like the really, really unusual nature of this particular Mann Act conviction and the fact that he's already been in prison, or jail rather, for like 11 months. This case is a one-off to begin with, but we're not aware of any case like this with a Mann Act conviction where anyone's done that much time to begin with. So.
And prosecutors, I'm imagining, have come back or will come back and say, well, listen, look, after the raids on his property, that he engaged, or what they would say, he allegedly engaged in criminal activity and, obviously violence, they say, with Jane. But they say, look, what was in his hotel room when he was picked up in New York. They made allegations of what he was trying to do while he was in the MDC, whether it was using other inmates' phone privileges to have three-way phone calls. That was litigated before trial. What would be your response to say, you make the point that he is a changed person. The violence that was shown during the course of this trial is from years ago. But how would you convince the judge to say, listen, we are being truthful, we are being honest, we are being forefront, that he really is a different human being? Because the judge, again, this was right after the verdict and didn't have an opportunity for a briefing schedule. How can you make the argument that he is different and that he should be trusted?
Well, I think, the point you mentioned about the arrest, unfortunately, Sean has struggled with drug addiction for a long time. And I think one of the good things and positive things is that has come out of his incarceration. It's given him an opportunity to rehabilitate. He's committed to continuing that. He's committed to a long-term program of therapy and helping with the domestic violence problem that he's had in the past. So, at a certain point, you have to just, maybe it is a leap of faith, but you have to just give a person another chance. And he really is committed to change and to there being a new chapter of service on his part. So, I think we have to hope that the judge will agree with that. And I think we've made a strong case for that.
If you look at the text messages and voice notes and the travel, hotel, the payment documentation, that these charges, the Mann Act charges, could have been proven based on that evidence alone and not anything else about racketeering or sex trafficking.
Well, I think that goes, I don't agree with that. I think that, as we argued in the papers, the government didn't really show that the purpose of the travel was to have sex for money, and that in fact all the testimony and a lot of the other evidence showed that the men were being paid for their time. But even if we were wrong about that one, we have a number of the other arguments that you mentioned that really aren't undermined by those records. So for instance, one of our main arguments is that this statute, which used to be called the White Slave Traffic Act, it has this long history, but even with this long history, it's never been applied to a case like this. The term prostitution in a lot of states doesn't include this conduct, even if someone's being paid. If the person making the payment is paying essentially to observe other people having sex, that's not prostitution. So we've got the First Amendment argument, as you mentioned, and the new trial argument. So all of those arguments, I think, are independent of, the issue you raised, which, so we think we have a really strong motion. And so we're hoping the judge will agree. We'll see.
Just to be clear, I'll list out a couple of things that stood out to me when we were watching the trial. There was apparently this voice message that was played from Combs to Paul, right, one of the purported sex workers. Hit me up when you close. There was a voice message. Hey, Jess, I need to get him from Atlanta to here. Let me know. Hit me up. There was a message from, I think, Combs to Christina Corum. Can security bring me 5,000? There was another audio message to Jane. I sent you 15K, baby girl. There was another one to Frank Rodriguez. Frank, make sure that room is set up right. So in other words, you could look at this and say, and the argument is, even despite all that, it's paying people for their time. It's setting up, let's say, amateur pornography. What makes this not? Because it always seemed that those charges were relatively straightforward, transporting people for the purposes of sex work. You're saying the intent was not sex work. That would just so happen, whatever happened, but the intent wasn't there. Just want to clarify that point.
Yeah, so that's one of the arguments. And then the other argument is just that it's more of a pure legal argument that prostitution only includes when you're paying someone to have sex with you. And he wasn't having sex with the males. So that's kind of a totally separate thing, even if you buy the government's argument that these payments were always for sex. And I do want to point out that, there's testimony and evidence that there were a number of occasions where the guys didn't end up having sex and they still got paid for their time. There's a bunch of text messages between Sean and people who work for Cowboys for Angels, one of the escort services, where, she's making clear that they dot all their I's and cross all their T's and that this isn't sex for money. So that's kind of his mindset. And the crime is transportation with the intent for the person being transported to engage in prostitution. So it's all sort of what's in his head and whether he's believing that he's paying, or arranging the transportation rather in connection with prostitution. And then you get into sort of what is prostitution and does it include, paying someone even if you're not the person who's going to have sex with them.
Let's say the motion for judgment of acquittal is not successful. Let's say the bail motion is not successful. And let's say your client is sentenced to a significant prison term, because there is discretion on the part of the judge. There's been a lot of talk in the news about this idea of a presidential pardon. Is the president really considering it? Have there been conversations with his team?
This is the part where we kind of separate. He did pay for prostitution. He did. Now, they try to say, and I'm going to make sure I get my Webster's or Merriam, whichever one they're using, for this, but I'm going to look up the actual word for prostitution because maybe Seti Nash been doing it all wrong. The practice or occupation of engaging in sexual activity with someone for payment. It doesn't say between two people. They were paid to be there with the explicit notion being you're going to sleep with this woman. He was paying for this. It's shown these women did not have the money to provide any of this crap. And I think that's the part where people are either messing up or sending the wrong situation. Wrong signals, wrong situation. So I don't believe it rises to what it is because Cassie's letter, the more I think about it, actually pisses me off. It does. What you talking about, Nash? Cassie's letter pisses me off because she still could have went criminal and decided not to. She could have. And then, why are you settling? Why not take it to court and drag him for all his pennies? That's one of the things that bothers me is how you got your money from two different places and all of a sudden it's all good. To me, just to me, the truest of the truest, quote unquote, victims want it in multiple ways. I want your money and I want you in jail. Look what you done to me. She actually says she still loves Diddy and cares for him on that stand when she had every right to say, I hate this man for what he did to me, how he makes me feel and how I'm scared and all of these things and blah, 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 some more stuff. But she did not say that. So, in all candor, I think that the government kind of nudged them like, we could lock your homegirl up You know, we're not really saying nothing, but we might be saying something. That's why I think that kind of came about, because it seemed to me like Cassie was more pissed off when that Young Miami waving her sign around talking about my man, my man, my man, my man, or however that damn song goes. I don't even know if they the ones who did it. But that's where I think Cassie's revenge came from jealousy that is being spread the wealth to other women. And I think she found out about Jane. That's my personal opinion. I have no facts on that. That's just what I think. Once again, that's just a thought. I'm not saying I got any proof of that. That's just me thinking out loud. I think she did. To me, nah. Should he have gotten bail? In a perfect world, yeah. But I think the judge, I real life think that the way in which they should have handled that should have been, hey, he'll be close to the jail. He just won't be in jail. And that, to me, would have worked. But the judge was never going to let him out. He wasn't. No matter what I can say, he wasn't going to let him out. Because they can't fight that ass whooping she got on that damn elevator, in that room by the elevator, hallway by the elevator. Why am I messing that up? Jeez Louisa. Anyways, share to keep your people aware, subscribe, turn on bells to notify. Let me know your thoughts on this one. Because essentially, if you're going to say that, oh, he shouldn't be in there because of that tape, then that's your take. But you got to remember, Diddy's team brought it up. They didn't dispute it as anything else. So if you're going to be one of those people say, oh, well, no, man, because of the tape. Well, damn, his team shouldn't have did what they did then. His team shouldn't have said, hey, bro, I don't know what the hell that is. Boy, that's that blended genetics right there, bro. Oh, my hair don't even grow right. I be pissed off at times. Anyways, that's what these Stars of David is for. But yeah, man. But check it out right here. Check out on that Boosie freaking case, bro. Like, I think Boosie gonna get 2.5. Personally, maybe 3. Other people, they disagree. I could show certain cases and certain things, but I think it's worth to watch. A lot of people are watching it, commenting on it. So y'all let me know your thoughts on that one. And just hit the list and it'll keep on playing. It'll get you to that Young Thug video that I really piss people off on. But it is what it is.